helpful. And we'll get started off with just getting a sense of who's here in the room. So if you can, I invite you to type in your name, or I guess you don't have to type in your name unless your name isn't already part of your Zoom, but let us know your affiliation and if this is how familiar you are with IARPC. That would be great. And also, if you could tell us your field of interest or scientific discipline, that also might be helpful. And I'll just give everyone a moment to do that. Great. Okay. And again, I encourage everyone to go ahead and do that so we can get a sense of who's in the room, where the interests are, and where we might need to focus some more of the context setting. And the general format for this meeting, so everyone is aware, I'm going to give a brief overview of IARPC just to get everyone on the same page, and then I'm going to turn it over to Olivia Lee and Colleen Strawhacker to discuss the diversity and inclusion self-forming team. That was a team that was kind of conceptualized after the Polar 2018 meeting and the Leading the Helm women's lunch that happened there. And so they'll give us an overview of that. And then we'll have Martin Jeffries talk about the development of the next 5-year Arctic research plan. And then we will have an input session, and depending on the size of the room here, we will either do breakout rooms, or if it stays below 30 people, we might just have that session all in one room together. Okay, and with that, I'm going to, are there any questions or thoughts before I launch in? If so, you can speak up or type them in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and just begin with this brief introduction here to IARPC, the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, and we are tasked with coordinating Arctic research across federal agencies in the US. There are quite a lot of agencies that have some type of Arctic research program in the US. I don't think this is quite all of them, but it's close. And as you might imagine, they have different missions, different programs and projects, and some of them might overlap and some of them might not. And that's a lot of people, a lot of pieces. And IARPC has been tasked with helping these different agencies coordinate and collaborate with each other through several different mechanisms. One piece of IARPC that is so important to us is that we are a large part of IARPC, which is open to anyone who wants to participate. We consult with the research community and those living and working in the Arctic on the planning of the Arctic Research Plan, which we'll be discussing later, as well as the implementation. We couldn't do it without everyone being involved. And to give a little bit of idea of the structure, we've got a federal-only committee. A large part of that is a staff group that meets once a month among it's a federal agency group where representatives meet monthly to kind of make sure the agencies are speaking with each other. But then we've got, oh, and that piece is led from the, well, in 2011, IARPC became part of the executive branch and is located in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building that's next to the White House. That's where our executive director sits or would be sitting. We don't have one currently, but that's part of the structure of IARPC. We are, here you can see where we fit in under the Office of Science and Technology Policy here. And Sarah, this might be outdated, so if it is, speak up, but I just wanted to give people a sense of kind of where we fit in the structure.
It's close enough, Meredith. Thank you.
Okay. But the federal structure is only a small piece. The bigger piece is the participation from non-federal collaborators, from everyone else. This is coordinated through the IARPC Collaborations website, and I'll be sharing some links in the chat as we go to connect there if you aren't already. Okay. And people that are involved, this is a smattering, some of different types of people who are involved here and in IARPC through the IARPC Collaborations website. And how these people are involved, we have different collaboration teams, and I'll show you the makeup of those collaboration teams in just a moment, but they are open, they're led by federal program managers as well as non-federal partners, and they meet monthly to discuss science topics or to implement the Arctic Research Plan and to kind of coordinate the community, get people collaborating, talking amongst themselves. We have meetings between different teams that all are kind of for the purpose of creating this more open, collaborative environment. And here are the different IARPC collaboration teams. We have a health and well-being team. We have a marine ecosystems team, a glaciers and sea level team, coastal resilience, sea ice, atmosphere, permafrost, and terrestrial ecosystems team. And then we also have an environmental intelligence team that is made up of 3 different sub-teams: observing, data, and modeling. And again, these teams meet monthly, and they are teams because in the Arctic Research Plan that we are implementing now, this 5-year Arctic Research Plan, each team corresponds to a chapter in the plan or a goal in the plan. And so each team is tasked with making sure that the performance elements, the pieces laid out in the plan that need to be completed under their chapter do get completed and are recorded. That progress is recorded. And with that, I am going to stop sharing this slide, and I will turn it over to Olivia and Colleen, and I will also just share my screen really quickly to show everyone where they can find more information on these different collaboration teams. And I'll put that in the chat and turn it over to Colleen.
Thanks, Meredith. That was a really good overview of IARPC for everyone. And I just want to thank everyone for showing up on your Sunday morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. It's really nice to see people online because I know we're all holed up in our respective living rooms and home offices and things like that. So it's really good to connect with everyone as we're all social distancing. So part of this, so Meredith gave a really good overview of kind of the IARPC structure. And actually, I'll go ahead. Meredith, do you want to drive the website again, or would you like me to do that?
Yeah, I can do it. Happy to do that.
Thank you. So Meredith just shared kind of the IARPC Collaborations website, which is the kind of platform that we use to all connect. And she talked about the 12 collaboration teams that were created to enact and fulfill parts of the Arctic Research Plan that we are in the middle of right now. But as Martin will talk about in a second, we're in the process of developing the next Arctic research plan, and we're trying to help make sure that we're getting a really diverse input into the development of the next Arctic research plan. So we decided to use one of our self-forming teams. So that's kind of down at the bottom. And these self-forming teams are actually a really good mechanism to get people together to just talk about things that they might be interested in that might not be kind of directly related to the US Arctic Research Plan. And so the one that I wanted to talk about today that was used to help put people together in this little Zoom room is the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group that is co-led by myself, Olivia Lee, Martin Jeffries, and Alan Pope. And you can see here we have this little webpage that you can go, and we have a bunch of resources on there right now. So we've had a number of different meetings so far that I'll talk about, but the thing, if you go down a little bit further, Meredith, you can see our terms of reference on what this diversity and inclusion team, what our aims and goals are. We have a diversity and inclusion guidelines library that if you have any that you would like to share, we'd be more than happy to post on the page. And we've had some really interesting meetings. We've kept it pretty open-ended on what topics people would like to talk about. So we had this really fun conversation on what it's like to be a woman in the field, in the deep field. And so we just had a chat on what people should prepare for as a woman going out to the field. We've had other conversations about kind of what we as a group would like to focus on in terms of diversity and inclusion in Arctic research. So we're using this group as a platform to make sure that we're getting diverse input into the next Arctic research plan. So these self-forming groups are a really good way to talk about and put together issues that might not be directly related to the Arctic Research Plan, but because the IARPC Secretariat has done such a good job creating such a good platform, it's a really good way to share ideas outside of those core collaboration teams. Olivia, did you have anything else to add at all about the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group?
Yeah, that was great, Colleen. Thanks. I think I'll just add that, you know, we have been pretty much focused on getting feedback and input from the US research community, but we certainly welcome people from the international research community to participate in conversation, especially if you have ideas on you know, upcoming webinars. Please feel free to connect with any of us co-leads. We really are welcoming of, again, being a diversity and inclusion team, getting more of these conversations on how to build just a better Arctic research culture as well. So thanks.
Thanks, Olivia. And I guess maybe if anyone has any questions at all, either about IARPC or the collaboration teams or the self-forming teams, I know it's a lot to throw at people if you're, especially if you're not kind of initially familiar with IARPC. We'd be happy to take questions now before we hand it over to Martin. So feel free to pop anything in the chat or speak up if you have any questions.
Colleen, this is Sarah, and I just want to make one, I just want to point out one thing. Meredith has put a couple links into the chat box. The links that are specific to teams and so forth will only work if you have joined IARPC collaborations. And so you need to do that on our public side. IARPC collaborations is open to anybody. We have a large number of international participants. We don't hound you. Things come, you can sign up for a weekly synopsis of what's going on. But in order to reach some of the links that are being put in the chat box, you do need to become a member. Thank you.
Thanks
Yep.
for that reminder, Sarah. Go ahead, Meredith. Did you have something to add in?
Yeah, just that last link I sent should be, you should be able to sign up from there.
So if you have any questions, feel free to speak up or pop them in the chat. Great, it looks like we did our job well then. That sounds good. Okay, so
It does look like we have a question.
yeah. Yeah, so there's a question in the chat about get into research PhD because of a dyslexia. Have you considered learning difficulties in science and what other diversities? So this is a really good question. And to us, the diversity and inclusion self-working group or the self-forming group, excuse me, is actually still relatively new. I think we've been around for maybe about a year or so, and we wanted it to be really open to whatever people wanted to talk about. So absolutely, I think that would be a great topic for a webinar. And if you have any ideas on who would be a good speaker, or if there are resources out there, please feel free to reach out to us. And I think that would be a great topic to talk about. I don't know if my co-leads want to add anything more.
Yeah, just second what Colleen says. Yeah, we're always looking for ideas, and that would be a great one to bring up as well. I think we, at one point, some people were feeling that there wasn't a place for them because it was too much focused on gender issues. So we're not solely focusing on gender issues in the Arctic. So please bring us your ideas.
Yeah, and just to add too, is that we know there are other kind of complementary initiatives going on too. So for example, APEX has a diversity and inclusion working group, and we've been communicating with them just to make sure that we're sharing ideas and resources across these different groups too. And so if you have a topic for a webinar, I'll pop my email in the chat, and maybe Olivia can too. And you can feel free to email us, and we can we can see where we can go with that. When will the next Arctic research plan period be? I have a feeling Martin will cover that next, so I'll leave that to him. And then any other questions at all?
Colleen, I thought it might just also be a really good opportunity to just mention that in addition to diversity and inclusion, we also have an early career science group. And one of the co-chairs of that group, I think Chelsea is on the line here. And I don't know if Chelsea might want to very briefly just indicate what that group is doing as well.
Hear me? Am I?
Yeah, we can, Chelsea. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, we as part of US APEX, so the National Committee for APEX, had been discussing the need to kind of encourage early career participation and just to identify who our network was. And in doing so, decided to partner with IARPC to develop this early career forum. And in this, we are trying to, like I said, encourage early career participation in other IARPC collaboration teams and other events that are happening. We're also looking for different opportunities to promote early career research, and also opportunities that might come up, funding or job opportunities or things like that, that we can either take that information from more senior or program managers and distribute that to an Arctic specific community of early career researchers or whatever it is that you identify as in our group. And so we're also looking for ways to kind of encourage diversity and inclusion. And in US APEX, we also started a task group there that we can also kind of coordinate with our early career forum and the diversity and inclusion working group for IARPC. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like me to add. Sorry, I didn't prepare anything.
No, I think that's a great introduction to the group. Thank you, Chelsea. And also just to kind of do a little advertisement for an upcoming meeting that'll be related to this one is that the Coastal Resilience Collaboration Team and this Diversity and Inclusion Working Group will be co-leading a meeting on April 8th on probably the topic will be kind of social science and human dimensions and the incorporation of those topics into the development of the next Arctic Research Plan. So that would be a really good topic. And Chelsea, we're planning on inviting your group, the early career folks, to join, because I think it would be great to have your input into that too. So just keep an eye out for that if you're interested in kind of the more social science aspects of the next Arctic Research Plan as well. And Meredith has brought that up so you can see that scheduled coming up on April 8th.
Great, absolutely. And I would just add too that we've been working with Meredith and we're planning to have a call with her in the next couple of weeks to see how we can work with the Early Career Forum as part of the larger Arctic Research Plan and see how we might get more early career involvement throughout that process, whatever that might look like.
Great. Any other questions at all? Awesome. Well, thanks for the input so far. I'm glad we have such an engaged group. This is going to be a fun discussion. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Martin Jeffries to take on his task for the day.
And Martin, let me know if you want me to drive or if you want to share from your computer.
I'll let you drive. Thanks, Meredith. So if you could just scroll up a little bit on the page that's now visible, because I'm just going to expand on what's on this page. It's my crib sheet, basically.
Okay, it should be at the top. It should be scrolled all the way to the top
Yeah,
now.
if you could scroll, what is the Arctic Research Plan to the top?
Okay, gotcha.
Great, thank you. Well, hello everybody, and welcome. I'd like to add my welcome and thanks to you for joining us today, wherever you're calling in from. I'm Martin Jeffries. I'm with the US Army Corps of Engineers Cold Regions Research and Engineering Lab in Hanover, New Hampshire, where it's very wet and miserable today. I hope the sun is shining where you are. So I have been associated with IARPC for a long time now, and I've been involved in the preparation of all three Arctic research plans. So involved in the beginnings of the preparation of the third Arctic Research Plan, which is the subject of this meeting. I was involved in the preparation of the current plan, the second plan, and I was involved in the preparation of the first plan. The first plan covered the period 2012 through 2017. The current plan covers the period 2017 through 2021. And the third plan will cover the period 2022 through 2026. So they're 5-year plans. IARPC is a statutory body created by Act of Congress, and that act was passed in 1984. The first plan was prepared in around 2010, 2011, after IARPC was invited to become a working group of the National Science and Technology Council in the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House. And you saw the photograph that Meredith put up there, that the Eisenhower Executive Office Building is the home of IARPC Executive Director, when there is one. There isn't one currently, as Meredith mentioned. But once IARPC became the responsibility of the National Science and Technology Council, then it finally had to get its act together and prepare a 5-year Arctic research plan. And so that was the genesis of the 2012 through 2017 plan. And we continue, obviously, to develop and implement those plans since. So because IARPC was created by Act of Congress as a federal body, a federal government body, then the Arctic Research Plan is a federal government document, and it's issued from the White House, from the Office of Science and Technology Policy. I mention that because that dictates that some of the things that IARPC does, and as Meredith talked about when she used the iceberg as an analogy for IARPC, that above the waterline we have the federal only activities, and below the waterline, not hidden by any means, we have the much larger and more interesting and exciting work of the collaboration between feds and non-feds. And non-feds include our overseas partners as well, who are most welcome. I want to emphasize that. But in terms of the Arctic research plans being federal only documents, that means that it can only be written by federal government employees, by civil servants. And we have a plan development steering group or steering team that will be very busy over the next few months in helping and guiding the development of the third plan. And that too is a federal only body. But apart from that, the process of developing the plan is, to use Meredith's words, is very open. And we are seeking input, advice, guidance, etc., from as broad a group of partners in the federal government and outside the federal government as we possibly can. How are we going to do that? We're doing it through meetings like this. As Colleen said, this is a meeting of the Diversity and Inclusion Self-Forming Team, or are we a working group? It doesn't matter. But we have the collaboration teams, which are responsible for implementing the current plan. They meet roughly monthly by Zoom, and they are now scheduling in their meeting agendas time for the types of discussion we're going to have today, seeking that input on what people think should be in the next Arctic research plan, how it should be organized, and so on. Another way that input is being sought, those of you who are from the United States will be familiar with the Federal Register, which is a federal organ in which the government announces what it's doing and opportunities for people to comment on federal actions and plans and so on. And before the 1st of April, so before Wednesday next week, a Federal Register notice will be released, and it will be open for 90 days. So from very late March through very late June, if my arithmetic's right. And so it will be possible to offer your input online. You can do it via the IARPC Collaborations website. There is an IARPC Collaborations Facebook page on which you could leave your comments and suggestions. You could also do it the old-fashioned way. You could write a letter, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it to the National Science Foundation. And there's also an email address at nsf.gov to which you could email your suggestions. So there are many ways to send in your comments and suggestions, to share your ideas for what you think ought to be in the next Arctic research plan. Another way that we had planned to obtain input was a series of workshops mainly in northern Alaska to meet directly with northern residents, Arctic residents, and Arctic indigenous peoples in Alaska. That plan is now changing because of COVID-19, and it's simply not practical to organize workshops in what were planned to be villages, somewhat remote villages with limited healthcare provision, etc. It would be irresponsible to do that now. So those workshops were looking into how we could do those in virtual fashion, as we are doing today, say using Zoom and so on, because it's very important that we do all we can to obtain input, recommendations, etc., from the people who live in the Arctic. They know what's happening there. They're experiencing Arctic change firsthand. They know what some of the critical problems are and some of the issues that need to be addressed by basic and applied research. So stay tuned for more information on those particular workshops, and are working with Northern residents and Arctic peoples to get their input. A couple of other important points about the Arctic research plans. They don't attempt to include all research that the federal government supports in the Arctic. What the plans focus on is bringing together the research that individual agencies will be doing, but which much more could be achieved if multiple agencies with similar research activities join together to create something greater than the sum of the parts through collaboration. So that's an important point about the plan. So it's not a comprehensive, all-inclusive plan, but instead, as I say, focuses on collaboration amongst the agencies to achieve a lot more than any agency could achieve alone. Another aspect of the plan is that the final document cannot be aspirational. It cannot say, we'd love to do this, but we're not in a position to do it at the moment because Congress hasn't appropriated the funds for this. We can't do that. The plan has to be built around what federal agencies know that they will be doing, what is already programmed, what they have the appropriated funds to do. But, and I feel this is an important point, while the plan that is released cannot be aspirational, I maintain, and I think most agree, but I'm willing to be contradicted, is that at this stage where we're seeking input, advice, and recommendations, this is an opportunity to be aspirational, to let the federal government know what you think is really important, that we really need research to be done in the Arctic. What are some of the big issues, some of the big problems that really need a collaborative research approach, not only amongst US federal agencies, but between US researchers and their overseas colleagues and organizations and governments. So think big at this stage. Don't hesitate to share your idea, no matter how small or large it may be. We want to hear from you. And to the US participants in particular in this call, I would say, I would emphasize the value of sharing your thoughts, your input, recommendations, etc., because it's important that program managers in the federal agencies, whether it's NSF, DOE, NASA, NOAA, etc., they could benefit from hearing from you about what you think really ought to be done. Because you may sow a seed that might yield a funding opportunity in the future for that particular topic and so on. I think I've spoken for my full 10 minutes here, and I've really covered all the points. So I will stop there, and if there are any questions, I will do my best to answer. Over, and thank you.
I just wanted to point out one more thing here, and this is this timeline here on the side of our page, just so people know where we are. We are still at the beginning of the process of developing the next plan. We're about to, as Martin mentioned, about to go into a Federal Register period for scoping of the next plan, and that will be open for 90 days. And then we'll have a workshop where that synthesized information will be taken in, and there will be the beginnings of a draft plan formulated, and then that draft plan will be written out over the spring of 2021, and then we'll have another Federal Register period where people can comment on that draft plan. Then we'll revise it and release it at the end of 21 is the goal.
Thanks, Meredith. I forgot to mention just how we're going to use all this input that we expect we will receive by the end of the Federal Register notice period. And of course, beyond. It's okay to submit your ideas after the end of June as well. We don't just shut down and close ourselves to any other input.
Great, thank you, Martin. So yeah, if there were general questions about how this process works, what we're looking for, now is a great time to ask them.
Yeah, can make a question from Italy.
Yes.
Jeffrey, I'm Vito Vitale speaking. We know each other quite well, but can you say more about the interaction of this process, about this plan with the general international process, for example, the Science Ministerial or other, which is the connection, or who will be the connection of this process in US with a general discussion and general plan we are discussing, for example, in the Science Ministerial?
Yes, hi Vito. Thanks for your question, and good to hear from you. Good question. In addition to creating opportunities such as this meeting today and the others I've described, to get input from as wide a spectrum of individuals and organizations and governments as possible, we're also accumulating a diverse collection of Arctic strategies, Arctic science plans, Arctic research plans, both at home here in the United States and from overseas, and combing through those, consulting those so we have a full and comprehensive picture of what individual agencies and different governments have planned, what their priorities are, and so on, that helps with our gaining a picture of what are the important issues and how are they being addressed, and how can IARPC best fit into these broader frameworks, including the Arctic Science Ministerials. IARPC here in the United States played a big role in Arctic Science Ministerial 1 that was held in Washington, DC, and a big role in the US preparations for and participation in Arctic Science Ministerial 2. And we anticipate that IARPC will be playing a further role in US preparations for and participation in Arctic Science Ministerial 3. And the work that we're doing at the moment I'm confident will inform the US participation in and contribution to Arctic Science Ministerial 3.
Martin, this is Sarah. If I may just add one other comment. So the performance elements that make up the meat of the current plan are all available. You can look at them on our website. And we link those directly to Arctic Science Ministerial deliverables. So you can, I think even on this page, I'm not sure, Meredith, I think you can search by deliverables. Those were deliverables from Arctic Science Ministerial 1 because they were being developed at the same time. So there is a very close coordination between them. And that was thanks in a large part to the efforts of Martin Jeffries. There was also a question in the chat box about whether the workshops that Meredith and Martin mentioned were public and or going to be held by Zoom. And in most cases, that is a yes. But as Colleen pointed out, our plans are being revised on a weekly, hourly basis as things evolve. But we will make sure that they are very widely announced.
Great. Thanks everyone for your questions, and we're happy to take other general questions if you have them. And if not, we can move on kind of to the next piece. And I think the general consensus is we're a small enough group that we don't need to do breakout rooms, but we might shift that plan just depending on how the discussion unfolds. But the next kind of, and I will share a different screen, plan, the next piece of this discussion is to move from general questions on what, on how the plan development process works to kind of diving in, getting some more insight from you all on what should be included in the next Arctic research plan. So I've got kind of these general questions here, and I'm going to be taking notes on this slide as we go, just so we can capture what the discussion, how the discussion unfolds. But we're wondering if you are familiar with the current research plan and how it's being implemented, what you think it's doing well, what you think we're missing. Also, if you have research issues that you think are important to include in the next 5-year Arctic research plan, please let us know. And also the final question is asking how the international community could be better integrated into the process. So if you have ideas on that, we're happy to hear them. And again, I'll be taking notes on here, and I'll be transferring those notes to our comment spreadsheet. So those will be recorded, and we'll be using the input that we received today to inform us as we're developing the next 5-year plan.
I'd encourage people to come off of mute to start giving us ideas rather than typing them into the chat box. We hope that we can have a bit of a dialogue here. And don't be shy.
Oh, hi, this is Bill Manley at the University of Colorado. I think one thing that's working really well right now is the IARPC collaborations, and it's amazing to see the the community building and collaboration coordination that's going on there very effectively. One little thing perhaps is being involved with the community. I've seen that the way the different teams are organized is logical. But I found that a few teams, specifically the Arctic Data Subteam and the Arctic Observing Subteam, they really are cross-disciplinary. And it would be really awesome if there was somehow, I don't know, because those two groups have much that could contribute to each other team, if you follow me. And yet not every person in those two teams can be on every other team. So I'm not exactly sure how to address that, but just to be aware of it, that maybe more cross linkages across relevant teams.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bill. I think in my experience with IARPC is kind of seeing some of those, I don't want to say silos, but sometimes the teams get very focused on, you know, what they're doing, and instead of how they can reach out and maybe build those cross linkages and try to work collaboratively towards common goals featured in the research plan. So I think trying to figure out how to push that forward would be a good thing.
Maybe have like coach an individual on the data sub team, multiple individuals to each also be engaged in one of the other teams or something. Cross-fertilization of ideas and support.
It's Martin, if I could add a comment that, yes, we're IARPC collaborations, and I think we do quite well in addressing the collaborations part, yet at the same time, ironically, there can be a tendency for the individual teams to just focus on their own topic. And we do all we can to encourage the teams to have joint meetings of 2 or more teams to address a particular critical or interesting Arctic topic. And certainly the environmental intelligence team, of which there are the 3 sub-teams, observing, modeling, and data, that is an important role for them. And those teams do often hold joint meetings with other collaboration teams because observing is so important to all disciplines, and data are so important to all disciplines, and all disciplines pretty much use modeling and so on. So that's a work in progress, Bill, but I do appreciate your comment. We need to be reminded of this, and thank you.
And we have a comment from Jennifer Austin, noting that understanding the survivability of wild fish populations as the Arctic changes for food security and the habitats change is important. So I'm going to include that here. And yep.
So yeah, and I appreciate Jennifer's comments, because I think like bits of that point are covered in some of the teams. So like, for example, the marine ecosystems would cover kind of wild fish populations and things like that. But I think, you know, and I know a lot of people roll their eyes at me because I feel like I say this all the time, but including more social science and social scientists in IARPC, and and moving that forward kind of will address more types of questions that Jennifer brought up, like in terms of food security for Arctic peoples. And we certainly need both Indigenous participation, Arctic resident participation, and social science participation to address those questions.
And I just want to jump in here and thank Jennifer for that point as well, particularly with the rapid ecosystem changes taking place in the Bering Sea. This is really a critical question, and one that we're trying to jump in and address, even though it's so new that it's not reflected specifically in this plan. And so we're trying to evolve ourselves to be able to address issues that come up and need a rapid response. So thanks for pointing that out. It's a really good and useful point.
Hi, everyone. This is Jessica Cross. I'll jump in and say and just second that. And one thing that we have been hearing a lot from the social science and the local and traditional knowledge community is that as we have to scale up this rapid response, there's so many different groups and agencies working on these issues and problems that it can be kind of exhausting for the local communities to constantly participate, and they struggle with participation fatigue. And one of the ways to combat that they've asked us is to start compensating people from their time in participating with us and sharing their expertise and knowledge with us and helping to co-design our studies. That's something that I've really taken to heart over the last year as a researcher, and I've started trying to build that support into my proposals. But one thing that I've found logistically is that that's actually really hard to do. As natural scientists, we don't really think of giving honoraria or supporting people for just attending a workshop, that's something that we view, our salary as covering. And so as we start using IARPC collaborations to support more of the social science participation, to support local community participation, some guidance from IARPC, with the combined, might of all of these federal agencies put together, maybe we could find a really coherent way to support these folks as they share with us.
I could just add on Jessica's comments as well, that having recently done a trip out to St. Lawrence Island and trying to figure out some of these ways to engage in as far as compensation is concerned and doing that, that's also logistically challenging and complicated to know how those mechanisms work and who you would need to reach out to and how to make that possible. And that changes from year to year or monthly. And so not all communities are the same, particularly in the Bering Strait region. And so if there was some sort of central place where people could go to determine how the best way to go about doing that, and not assuming just a blanket statement for all of Alaska Native communities or something to that effect. So it's quite nuanced, and there's not really that many resources available to any researcher that just wants to do it. And then also, as Jessica was saying, this fatigue of having all these different people coming from different locations and agencies and maybe asking the same things and not coordinating those efforts on the front end before coming to the communities.
And certainly boundary organizations can be a really huge help with this. Boundary organizations kind of like IARPC that help the different federal agencies talk to each other, but not just that. Places like the Aleutian Bering Sea Islands Cooperative, among others, can really be valuable in that respect. But again, figuring out how to support them through your grant structure, especially when things change so often, just some real guidance from that on our end. Not necessarily on their end about who to talk to and who to pay, but how we actually initiate that on our end would be really valuable.
So
thanks, Chelsea. I know you guys were just there. So you definitely have the most recent experience of anybody.
So these kind of comments are extraordinarily helpful because the last plans were developed around science themes, and Bill Manley's comment early, and we tried to, in environmental intelligence, bring together those components, but it just hasn't worked as fluidly as we had hoped. But these kind of comments are really good because I think they force the plan developers into thinking outside just disciplines to broader issues. So it's great to share these kind of ideas with us. So thank you.
Well, it's Martin, if I could just jump in again. The current plan is built around very disciplinary oriented goals. The first plan, they weren't called goals, I don't think. Maybe they were, but they were very multi and interdisciplinary, and quite deliberately that Brendan Kelly and others who spearheaded the development of that plan, they saw an opportunity to take a multidisciplinary approach, to encourage this collaborative approach amongst the federal agencies. I think it's fair to say that it didn't work out as well as we had hoped. But I think that was maybe because it was too early. But now, with quite a number of years of IARPC collaborations experience under our belts, it might be worth revisiting that and seeing how we could make it work. Over.
this is Bill Manley again. If I could just follow up a little bit, I totally agree. And, you know, I think maybe there's no way around having teams or goals be oriented towards either disciplinary or multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary goals. But just my thought there in particular was that to the teams, maybe this is my bias, the data and observing teams are kind of cover or could help with every other team. So somehow specific cross linkages between those two foci and the other foci.
Yeah, it's, I'm not sure how to best address that, but I will point out that the modeling team, which is another of those sub-teams, they've kind of taken a different direction than the data and the observing team, and most of their meetings are in joint with other teams. So there are a couple of different models that we can look at.
That sounds great.
I'm wondering, since we're in an international forum here, if any of our international partners on the line can speak to how their kind of Arctic researchers collaborate and coordinate across their institutions. Obviously, I think Europe and other places are a little bit different in that, but I don't know if IARPC is unique in the international community in that we have kind of this representation of 14 major agencies who do Arctic work and all of that. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if anyone from the international community has can comment to that, I'd be really interested to hear.
So I'm not part of the international community since I am a US federal employee, but I'll chime in and just say, and I don't know if IARPC is the place for this, but one of the challenges that I have, and I see that Vito just posted something, but also I'll finish my thought really quick, is how do we better support international research? So one of the challenges that I have as a program officer at NSF is that it's really difficult for me to fund international partners. So we're mostly funding US-based researchers to go to other countries, and it's hard for us to find mechanisms to support people working in other international contexts, which can really kind of stymie different international collaborations. So that's kind of one thing that maybe we can think about if IARPC can help to kind of support some of those international collaborations.
I'll jump in and say that one way that we've really been trying to encourage U.S. participation in international efforts lately is through the Synoptic Arctic Survey Program. Jackie's not on the line, and she'd really be the best person to say something about that this morning. I don't know if anybody else from the SAS team is here and wants to chime in about that.
So I don't know if anybody else but from the SAS team is here, but I think Mosaic has been a really good example of a big, large international collaboration and finding more mechanisms to support things like that. I think Mosaic provides a really good example of that as well.
I'll just go ahead and say that if anybody is interested in getting involved in SAS or contributing to that effort, there is going to be a workshop tomorrow morning, US time. I'm not sure what time it is, Greenland. I would encourage you to check out the schedule that has been posted online for Arctic Sciences Summit Week and to please join us.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. And it looks like we're having some people sign off at the top of the hour. So thanks for joining us. And Will Manley has noted the Arctic Observing Summit next week with their agenda that is posted, which is another good way to participate in some of these conversations. And I'll have a poster there with this same asking for feedback. So you might hear from me again.
Yeah, that starts tomorrow through Thursday.
Thank you.
It's Martin. Question number 3 about how can the international community be better integrated into IARPC? Well, in this process of gathering information and participating in IARPC, you could turn that around and say, ask the question, how could IARPC become better integrated into international efforts? I'd like to throw that open, and if anyone would care to comment. You know, what are steps that we could take as IARPC and IARPC collaborations to be more integrated? Are we already sufficiently integrated? Are we doing fine? Or are there other things we could do and do better?
Take a stab at that one, Martin. You know, as someone who is constantly writing proposals and trying to build collaborations, we do rely on some of the EU Arctic research planning documents to kind of try to leverage, hey, if I get funded with this NSF proposal, it would also link into this research priority going on in Europe. So if we could maybe, you know, make sure that the plan is somehow still broad enough that it allows people writing proposals in other countries to be able to point to their ability to support, I know it's a Fed plan, but to support research priorities that require collaborations because we can't fund it all. I think that would be another useful way to support the research community, you know, making sure that there is enough wiggle room in the scope of our research goals, that people writing proposals in other countries can point to it as being able to support some of the information we're trying to gather.
I think that relates to what I mentioned earlier in response to Vito, how at this stage of the development of the third plan, we're gathering many different documents describing Arctic science plans, research plans, strategies, and so on, both here at home and overseas. And I agree with you that at least being aware of what organizations like the European Commission and Horizon 2020 framework are planning is a good thing to do, because the EU has been a big funder of Arctic research within the European Union countries, and certainly we have some good examples of how US researchers and EU based researchers have come together, bringing US resources and European Commission resources through Horizon 2020 together to do joint research plans. That actually goes back a long way now to search in a former incarnation and during International Polar Year, particularly, which was when I started at the National Science Foundation, that search and what was it called? I forget the European Union project, Horizon 2020 project, what it was called at that time. It was another contrived acronym, but there was a formal agreement between the two to collaborate. So that was a good example of US funds through individual researchers and organizations being tied with the European funds to advance Arctic observing, amongst other things.
I think also that, you know, we do a really good job of big projects that look at the, you know, Central Arctic Ocean, where every country can feel they can contribute something. But when you look at smaller scale projects that happen within the boundaries of a certain country, there might still be opportunities to do better international collaboration, but that's a lot harder to do because you're not putting everyone on the same ship. So if there's ways that we can bring in more people to brainstorm ideas of how to do better international collaboration on these smaller scale projects and not these big, very ambitious, expensive projects, I think there's also value in that.
I agree. You remind me of a meeting of the NSF Office of Polar Programs Advisory Committee many years ago in the run-up to International Polar Year. I was still at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I was a member of the advisory committee. And they had the coordinator of the IPY International Office call in to brief the committee on where the preparations for IPY stood. And of course, the emphasis was very much on international collaboration, as you would expect, but the emphasis was also very much on big projects. And I sat there biting my tongue and lips, frankly, because it bothered me that there was so much emphasis on big projects, and it risked leaving out many individual scientists and providing them with opportunities to collaborate with a colleague, just a single colleague, you know, just an American scientist and a Japanese scientist to work together. I don't think it matters what scale you work at, it all matters, it all counts.
So I'll jump in here. It's Jessica Cross again, and put in a pitch for the Distributed Biological Observatory model. This, you know, was intended to solve exactly the same kind of problems that you were just talking about, Martin. You know, these small scale projects, how can we work together, avoid duplication of efforts, and put together really high quality science supported on the international stage. And the model that we eventually came up with was to, you know, have this sort of grassroots, everybody in the scientific community agree on a couple of time series sites that they thought were really important. And then, you know, any project, any country going through the area that contained those sites, just encourage them to stop there, collect that data, and then on top of that, share that data. So that we could develop a crowdsourced seasonal time series, which is so valuable for so many different variables, especially in a rapidly changing Arctic. And, you know, my dream would be to sort of push that model in a pan-Arctic perspective all the way around. You know, we're slowly marching, you know, away from the Chukchi towards both the east and the west. But I think that that could be a really neat model to develop these connections between smaller scale projects and contribute on the international scale.
We have a few comments in the chat box too. Meredith, did you want to read those out? Or?
Sure. Yeah, I will do that. So first, I will, before addressing Britt's question, which is a little bit of a change of topic, I will note that Kelly asked if we could work more closely with the IASC working groups, and Bill seconded that, and that maybe IARPC could encourage participation with IASC and SAON initiatives, as well as global ones such as GEOS, for coordination, as well as coordinating funding to some extent and he agreed that DBO was a good model. And I wanted to maybe, if Sarah has anything to say about that, since she has worked with IASC in the past, and yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Meredith. So we do, we make very, very, very significant efforts to coordinate with IASC, and Alan has been wonderful, and Larry Hinsman and Matthew Druckenmiller have been wonderful, and you'll see a lot of IASC postings on our website. In addition, we have an IASC, US Forum to IASC working group is part of our website. And that is where all the US members to IASC working groups can post information and share information. And in the spring, we always try to have at least one member of the US working group come to, the US member to a IASC working group, come to collaboration team meetings and report out what's going to be taken care of business at IASC meetings, and then they'll report out afterwards. But it has been an effort, and it has not been as successful as I think it could be. And I think to the extent we can continue to push that, I think there is a lot of value in using the IASC working group mechanism as an interface with what IARPC Collaborations is doing. So thank you for offering that up. I suppose I could offer one area that we have not put a lot of effort into is coordinating as closely with Arctic Council working groups. And I think that that's another area where we should probably explore whether there are more and more linkages to working groups like PAIM and AMAP that are doing science activities. We do that on kind of a case-by-case basis, but it is not systematic.
Yeah. Hi,
Jackie.
this is
good
Jackie.
morning.
A couple of points I'd make. Hi, yeah, I was on the IASC Council meeting, sorry. Listening, interfacing with that. We signed another memorandum of agreement between the Pacific Arctic Group and IASC. That's turned out to be a very solid, the Pacific Arctic Group is a coordination of 6 countries. We're having our meeting tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern time, just to let you know. I think I put it up on the IARPC Marine Working Group site. But I wanted to point out that that interaction with IASC has been very strong, and we cross linkages of international countries. It kind of hits on what Jessica was talking about. Related to the expansion, for example, of the DBO, we have that, and we'll have some presentations on that, both tonight and also at the survey that I see on this screen. We'll have our workshop at 1200 UTC time tomorrow, just to let people know on that. But that has provided a forum for both international pan-Arctic type of collaborations, both through the DBO and developing on the Synoptic Arctic survey, and combined with the new fisheries agreement as these ships go into the Central Arctic. So I think that's just one example of how we do have connections with IASC quite a bit, and with the Arctic Council. I sit on the Integrated Ecosystem Assessment of the Central Arctic Ocean, which is the PAIM Arctic Council, interfacing with ICES and Pisces, which are the 2 fisheries groups on either side of the Arctic. So there are individual connections, and other folks are there are US scientists that are interfacing, and I think maybe we need to catalog that a little better than we do.
Thanks so much for that, Jackie. I'm actually thinking about maybe we can add a like a button to our profile system to kind of try to capture where those linkages are so that we know who to reach out to. I know you're a superwoman though, so how do we get the next generation to step up and to integrate into those systems, those international systems, and bring them back down into our US one?
No, I'm sitting with Christina. Yeah, we're 6 feet apart.
Hi, Christina. Sorry to
But,
put you on the
and
spot.
Chelsea's on here. We, on the meetings, I would say that on the meetings we had, that was on the SAS, the Synoptic survey. And IAS put in a funder for 6 early career. US NSF put in for 6 early career. So we had over 20% of that. So I think that we just have to keep it to early career, postdocs, and early, even up into, as people advance. We just have to keep working at it.
Okay, before I move to Britt's question, are there any other thoughts on this international kind of connection topic? Okay, so Britt has asked, with the extreme disruption of COVID to the field research, science convenings, higher education, has there been any discussion about the need to assess the fallout of this disruption to the Arctic research community directly? Is that relevant to the plan given the time frame of the plan in any way? I think that's a good question that I have not tried to wrap my head around yet, other than just changing the way our engagement strategy looks to being all online. Sarah, maybe Martin, you might have other thoughts. I know that IARPC, we're not planning to release the next plan until 2021, but we're kind of trying to use our web platform to help coordinate what different research programs are doing to address this COVID-19 crisis by posting documents and protocols. Maybe we're having a discussion at our next staff group meeting to kind of get agencies to talk with each other about how they're each managing that. So I think that there is a role that IARPC might play helping kind of coordinate some of the efforts around this, but I'm not sure that it's directly related to the next plan. Sarah or Martin?
Well, I'll just jump in and say that it is such a, as we all know, given the fact that we're sitting here instead of in Akureyri, this is just evolving so quickly that, as Meredith said, we are trying to keep the community informed as agencies come out with procedures and policies. I do have to say that the best tactic that any researcher could take at this point in time is to talk to their program manager directly about the impact. But the longer term and bigger questions, and I think that that's what you're getting at here, are still going to have to see how it evolves. I don't think that there's an answer to that question quite yet. I would say that something that we have been talking about in the IARPC Secretariat is that we've been doing this kind of remote collaboration for about 6 or 7 years now, and we're pretty competent at it. And we have team leaders that are engaging and know how to use the platforms and are reaching out to their communities. There's a wonderful post by Caitlin Florentine just encouraging the Glaciers community, hey, use this space to stay connected. And so we do encourage people to use this space for that kind of connection and holding of these types of meetings. So we're thrilled that everybody's here today and finds this to be a place where we can gather to make sure that we stay connected. I think that's all I can say. I don't know if Colleen Strawhecker might have something to add too, or I heard Jackie jumping in there.
Jackie, go ahead if you had something to add.
Okay, go ahead, Colleen, I'll follow.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate Sarah's point about talking to your program officer. I feel like that's been most of my job over the past couple of weeks, has been just trying to figure out fieldwork situations for scientists. And at this point, I think we're just trying to make it through 1 week at a time, because we just don't know the long-term kind of what the time scale of this situation is going to be. But that being said, you know, as I was chatting in the chat box as Sarah was talking, I think it might be a good idea. And again, this might not be related to the next Arctic research plan, or maybe we can think about how this might fit in, but creating a pretty obvious space on the IARPC collaborations platform to share both resources, whether, you know, it's recommendations coming out of federal agencies, or just providing a space for scientists to share ideas. I think I think I put it when we were meeting earlier, we all have had our legs taken out from under us, and we're trying to figure out not only kind of how we can continue science without putting people at risk, but how we can support, for example, early career researchers who lose a year of data and data collection, and how do we protect our Arctic communities who are at a higher vulnerability than those of us who are not living in small rural communities and things like that. And we can think about how that relates to the next Arctic research plan in terms of how agile IARPC can be in these situations.
Yeah, this is the only thing I was going to add, is that this conversation about COVID-19 and impact on science was brought up continuously at both the first and the second edition of the council, the IAS council that's going on. So they're going to be writing a position paper on that, and so I would imagine the IAS part of the IARPC collaborative teams will have a cross link to this issue pretty soon. So it's something that's been that I've been on the last couple of days.
And I see somebody has put in the chat the idea of a coffee hour. I think it was Colleen, and I want to say that I think that that's a great idea. Some of you may know we regularly host program manager chats. They're probably our most well-attended events, 80 at the last one, where people can come in and just talk to program managers. And so this is a unique feature of IARPC, is it brings the federal program managers into communication with international researchers, Indigenous people from northern communities, from academic communities, all into that one space. And so we might be able to arrange something like that on a pretty quick basis and get word out about that. So thanks for that idea.
Yeah, and just I was just reiterating Kelly's idea, so I want to make sure she gets credit for that idea, but we can also let it kind of evolve into something so we can have kind of a networking or coffee hour. I know in a previous diversity and inclusion meeting, we were talking about having a book club. So if we want to kind of, I know we will probably, now that a lot of us are not doing a lot of traveling and we've lost our field work, we might have some more time. If you can carve out time now that we're all taking care of children and staying at home, a little bit more time for reading and writing, that might be a good way to do it too. So.
Okay, well, we're getting towards the end of this session, but I want to make sure that everyone who has thoughts related to the conversation so far, or other thoughts, has an opportunity to share them either in the chat or out loud. We really just want to be as open as possible and really welcome any thought or question that you have. And if you want to instead wait and think about it, because like Colleen said earlier, this is a lot of information. There are ways, and I'll just share them again in the chat. There's a Google form that you can fill out that you can take time to sit and think about the answers to, or emailing any of us. And I will also put the NSF email in the chat box as well. And then we did have one more comment from Chelsea, noting that perhaps we could coordinate something through the Early Career Forum about how to deal with COVID-19 related to field work for researchers for early career or resources for early career researchers. Yep, sounds like a really needed thing. I'm just gonna put a couple of those links in the chat here. Here's the link to a form on, whoops, nope, just kidding. Here's the link to the online form. And here's the NSF email address that you can also send comments to. And are there any other closing thoughts? Colleen, Martin, Olivia, Sarah?
Just a quick thought from me, thanks, Meredith. Looking through the list of participants, and thank you everyone for remaining on the call or joining whenever you did. But the female to male ratio is very high, and this has got very little to do with the next Arctic research plan, other than diversity, including a more equal distribution of male and female participants in all we do would be great. So anything we can do to encourage the participation of my lot in our work, let's think about that.
Yep, and we definitely want to encourage all gender identifying groups to join the diversity and inclusion team.
And there is a breakout group tomorrow on
gender and polar research.
gender and polar research and inclusion. That's tomorrow, right?
Yeah, well, Eastern time. I don't know what time UTC.
Yeah, you have to look it up on the calendar. I don't remember all the UTC names.
I think that would be 5 GTC, 9 Alaska time.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks everybody for sharing your ideas, being open to this kind of format, and for joining us. Really been insightful, and we will try to do a number of more webinars. Feel free to join them as you are available.
Yeah.
Thanks from me too. It's been time really well spent.